There's a town where the ocean talks, not with waves, but with whispers. When journalist Arav Hale arrives in the forgotten coastal town of Eldermere, he believes he's chasing a legend. But when the sea starts whispering his own name, the story turns on him. Each tide brings voices from a shipwreck long buried, and one truth the ocean refuses to keep hidden. Watch till the end, because when the ocean finally speaks, it doesn't whisper, it remembers. The bus coughed its way out of the fog and stopped at a rusted sign that said Eldermere, POP 612. Beyond it, the coastline disappeared into gray nothing. Arav Hale stepped down, duffel slung over one shoulder, notebook in hand. The air tasted like metal and salt. Somewhere out there, the ocean breathed. He'd been chasing stranger things, but something about this place felt wrong before he even reached the harbor. The mist wasn't just fog, it was heavy, oily, almost alive. The driver called out, "Last stop. Bus won't be back till Friday." Arav nodded. "Wouldn't matter. I'm here for a story." The driver smirked. "Everyone says that. No one writes it." The town was small, mostly boarded up shops and crooked houses leaning toward the sea. The few people he passed didn't meet his eyes. They moved like shadows with errands too heavy to explain. He found a room above a cafe that smelled of damp coffee beans and rust. The owner, a woman named Mara, handed him the key without asking questions. "Keep the window closed," she said. "Why?" "The wind carries things," she murmured. "Voices sometimes." He thought she was trying to spook him. Local color. Every dying town needed its ghost story. But that night, he woke to the sound of the sea whispering. At first, it was just noise, wind through a cracked frame. Then, distinct syllables, soft as breath against his ear. "Hale." He sat upright, pulse hammering. He listened. Only the slow drag of waves against the rocks. He laughed once, too loud for the quiet room, then wrote in his notebook. First night. Local superstitious. Possible auditory pareidolia. He underlined it twice. Rational, clinical. But when he lay down again, he couldn't shake the feeling that the voice had known his name. Morning brought gray light and gulls screeching above the rooftops. Arav walked to the harbor, notebook tucked under his arm, every step echoing off the damp planks. The sea looked endless and cold, a sheet of moving steel. An old fisherman sat near the docks, pipe clamped between cracked lips, mending a net that looked older than the town itself. Arav approached. "You from around here?" "Born. Might die here too," the man said without looking up. "I'm writing a piece about coastal legends. People say the ocean whispers." The man's hands paused. "People say a lot. Question is, what's it whispering to you?" Arav smiled, playing along. "Haven't learned the language yet." "Best not to," the man said. "Sea's got a memory. Don't like being reminded." A low ka drew Arab's gaze upward. A seabird, white feathers streaked gray, perched on the dock rail, head tilted, eyes sharp as obsidian. It wasn't moving, just watching him. "That one yours?" Arav asked. The old man shook his head. Never seen it follow anyone before. The bird launched itself into the air and circled above Arav, then disappeared into the mist. He caught himself watching for it long after it was gone. The day stretched thin. Arav explored narrow streets where paint peeled like sunburned skin. Every window seemed to hide someone watching. When he asked questions, doors closed softly. The only place open past dusk was a bar called The Anchor's Rest. Inside, the lights buzzed like trapped flies. 3 locals sat at the counter, their eyes dull with fatigue or fear. The bartender, a tall man with a limp, poured whiskey without asking what he wanted. "You the writer?" he said flatly. "Mara told me." "Guilty," Arav replied. "What can you tell me about the whispers?" The bartender's gaze lifted, unreadable. "They start as names. Always names." "Whose?" He didn't answer. Just set the glass down hard enough to spill a little. Outside, the fog had thickened again, swallowing the street lamps one by one. On his way back, Arav heard the ocean more clearly than before. Not crashing, breathing. Each wave rolled in with a murmur. Each retreat carried a sigh. When he reached his building, something fluttered above the door. The Seabird again. It looked straight at him, then gave a single low cry, not a screech, more like a warning. He froze, the sound crawling up his spine. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of kelp and iron. The sea roared suddenly, as if in reply, and through it came the whisper again, unmistakable now, cutting through every other sound. Hail! This time, it wasn't from the sea. It came from behind him. He turned fast. No one. Just fog curling around the lamppost. Empty street. Empty sky. The Seabird had vanished. Arav stood alone in the mist, heart pounding, pen in his fist like a weapon. He whispered back to the darkness, "What do you want from me?" No answer came, only the long, distant sound of a ship's bell, ringing somewhere deep beneath the waves. The morning hit cold and colorless. The town felt emptied out, like someone had turned down the volume on life itself. Arav hadn't slept. The whisper still circled in his head like the seabird that kept vanishing into fog. He went back to the docks. Same gray sea, same smell of diesel and rot. The old fisherman, Calder, wasn't there this time. Only the seabird, perched on a buoy, facing him, wings damp from mist. "Still following me?" Arav muttered. The bird tilted its head, unblinking. He started recording on his phone. Day 2. Subject appears to respond to presence. Possible conditioning behavior? The bird took off mid-sentence and glided down the coast, low over the waves. Arav hesitated, then followed. It led him along a path of black rock toward a narrow inlet where waves hissed and curled into a cove. Rusted debris littered the sand, broken timber, corroded metal, an anchor half buried in seaweed. He crouched and brushed off a plaque bolted to a stone marker. In memory OFTH crew OFTH Lorna Gray, Lost ETSEA, 2004. He read the list of names. One stopped him cold. Arlen Hale. His breath fogged the metal. Same surname, wrong first name, but something about it twisted in his chest. He stepped back. The seabird landed beside the plaque, claws gripping the edge. It looked from the inscription to him and gave a low croak that sounded almost like speech. "Don't," he said to it softly. "Don't start making sense." At the library, dust hung in beams of weak light. The librarian, a thin man with a permanent squint, seemed startled to see anyone. "You researching the wreck?" he asked. "How'd you know?" "Everyone who comes here is." He slid a newspaper across the desk. "Storm claims SIX. Trawler lost OFF Eldermere." The article's grainy photo showed the Lorna Gray listing in heavy seas. The first mate, Arlen Hale, 28. Arav frowned. "Any relation still here?" The librarian's voice dropped. "Arlen's father, Old Calder, lives near the North Pier." Arav froze. The fisherman with the pipe. He left without another word. Calder's shack sat at the edge of the rocks, the wind howling around it. The door was open. Nets hung like cobwebs inside. Calder sat by the fire, pipe smoke curling into the dark rafters. "I know why you're here," he said before Arav spoke. "You're him, or you're what's left of him." "I'm not Arlen." Calder turned, eyes sharp. "A name don't change what the sea remembers." Arav swallowed hard. "Why does it whisper?" Calder's hands trembled as he filled his pipe. "Because no one ever listened when it screamed." Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere far off. Arav took a step closer. "You think it's them?" "The crew." "I think it's guilt," Calder said. "And guilt has a voice if you stand close enough to the tide." The seabird landed on the windowsill then, dripping rain, shaking its feathers. Calder looked at it and went pale. "It followed him too," he whispered. "The day before the storm." Arav turned to ask what he meant, but Calder's expression had gone distant. "Leave this town before it remembers more than you do," he said, almost pleading. The rain came down in sheets that night. Arav sat at the desk in his room, staring at the name Arlen Hale written on the page. The whisper returned faint, rhythmic, like words carried through pipes. He leaned closer to the window. Outside, the seabird sat on the sill, feathers plastered to its body. It was staring into the room. The glass rattled. A faint metallic sound followed, a bell, deep beneath the surf. Then he heard it. Clear this time. "You left us." Arav stumbled back. His notebook fell. pages fanning open to a blank sheet now streaked with damp fingerprints that weren't his. He looked again. The marks formed a shape, a line of script that faded as he watched. You were there. He ran outside into the storm. Rain stung his eyes. Wind clawed at his coat. "Who's there?" he shouted. His voice was swallowed by the roar of waves. The Seabird cried once and took flight, diving toward the cliffs. He followed, slipping on wet stone, until he reached the edge where the ground fell sharply into churning water. The bird wheeled in the air above a dark shape below, half buried in the sand of the cove. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat he saw it. The rusted hull of a ship. The letters barely visible on its side spelled Lorna Gray. Arav slid down the slope, landing hard beside the wreck. The tide clawed at the debris. He pressed his palm to the corroded metal, and the world blinked out. He was back in the storm again. Only not tonight's storm. That storm. Deck tilting, men shouting, freezing rain needling his skin. Someone grabbed him by the shoulder. "Arlen, get below." The next wave hit, and he was in the sea, dragged under, lungs burning. He saw faces reaching for him in the dark, and then nothing. He jolted awake, coughing seawater, though he was on dry sand. The Seabird stood over him, silent. He whispered hoarsely, "What did you show me?" The bird only tilted its head, then took off toward the horizon where the first light of dawn broke through. He followed its path until it vanished into the glare. Behind him, the surf hissed, and somewhere deep below, a single bell rang again. The next morning dawned clear for the first time since Arav had arrived. The sea was calm, unnaturally calm, like something waiting. Gulls wheeled overhead, but the Seabird, his Seabird, was nowhere in sight. He walked back to Calder's shack. The door creaked open in the wind. Inside, cold ashes filled the fireplace. Calder was gone. On the table lay an oilskin bundle. Arav unfolded it to find a photograph. The Lorna Gray's crew lined up before their final voyage. He was there, younger, salt-stung smile, eyes bright with the arrogance of someone who thought the sea could be tamed. Beneath it, scrawled in faded ink, he came back when the sea called his name. He sank onto the chair, the edges of the photo cutting into his fingers. For 20 years he'd carried a blank in his life, a stretch of memory that had never made sense. A car crash that wasn't. A fear of deep water he couldn't explain. Now the blanks were filling themselves, and every answer led back to the ocean. Outside, thunder cracked again, though the sky was cloudless. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon. There, a white speck circling far offshore. The Seabird. He ran toward the cliffs, the photograph clutched in his hand. The wind hit harder the closer he got to the water. The cove below shimmered with the wreck's shadow. The bird landed on the rocks near the tide line, calling once, sharp, urgent. Arav climbed down, boots sliding, palms raw. He reached the bottom as the tide started turning. "Why me?" he shouted over the waves. "What do you want me to do?" The sea answered in motion, a sudden surge that revealed more of the wreck, metal ribs glistening like bones. He stepped into the shallows. The water bit at his skin, ice cold. His reflection broke and twisted on the surface. Beneath it, he saw faces again, not ghosts, just memories taking shape. He remembered the storm, the lightning tearing the sky, the Lorna Gray breaking apart. He had jumped ship. He hadn't meant to survive, but the ocean had spat him out, nameless, memory erased, so it could one day call him back. He whispered to the surf, "I'm sorry. I remember." The Seabird moved closer, its feathers slicked by spray. It wasn't afraid. It stared at him the way Calder had, as though seeing two people in one body. It gave a low cry and spread its wings toward the sea. Lightning flickered again, though no clouds darkened the sky. The water began to glow faintly around the wreck. Arav waded deeper until the waves hit his chest. The Seabird flew ahead, skimming the surface, circling the broken hull. The whispers came back, layered and clear, not angry now, but pleading. "Stay. Hear us. Let go." The ocean didn't want him to drown. It wanted him to remember them. He reached the hull, touched the rusted edge. For a heartbeat, he saw them, the crew, not drowning, but standing in the light beneath the water, watching him. Not accusing, waiting. He lifted the photograph and let the tide take it. The moment it left his hand, the wind stopped. The air went still. The sea quieted. The Seabird hovered in place, wings gleaming silver in the dim light, then dove into the water, vanishing into the glow. The light spread outward, then slowly faded. Silence fell, pure and heavy. When Arav woke, he was lying on the sand, sunlight warm on his face. The wreck was gone. No twisted metal, no trace. Only a single feather lay beside him, white-edged in gray. He picked it up, dry, weightless. He looked around. The Seabird was nowhere. The town was the same, but quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after something has been said. He walked back through Eldermere. People glanced up as he passed, cautious, curious. No one spoke, but they didn't look away either. Even Mara at the cafe met his eyes and gave a single nod. At the pier, he found Calder again, sitting in his usual spot, pipe cold between his fingers. The old man didn't seem surprised. "Thought you'd gone under," Calder said. "I did," Arav replied. "In a way. You hear them still?" Arav looked out to sea. The water glimmered, peaceful. Not like before. It's quieter. "That's how you know they're done talking." Calder smiled faintly. "Sea don't whisper forever, just till it's heard." Arav reached into his pocket and placed the feather on the railing. The wind lifted it, carried it out over the waves. For a moment, he thought he saw the Seabird again, far off, flying straight into the horizon. Then it was gone. Epilogue. Weeks later, back in the city, Arav sat at his desk surrounded by half-written notes and photographs. He'd tried to write the story a dozen times. Each version felt wrong, too shallow, too neat. He opened the window. The city air was dry, distant from salt and tide, yet in the faint hum of traffic, he thought he heard the ocean again, just for a second. Not whispering names this time, just a single word. "Listen." He smiled. For the first time in years, the sound didn't frighten him. He began to type. The ocean never forgets, but it forgives in its own language. In Eldermere, I learned to hear it, and in doing so, to hear myself. He stopped, letting the words settle. Outside, a seabird's cry echoed faintly through the window, though there were no coasts for miles. He looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Somewhere, beyond the noise and the wind, the sea answered, not in sorrow, not in anger, but in peace. And that was the town that whispered to the ocean, where every wave carries a memory, and some stories never really sink. If the whispers of Eldermere sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves a good mystery from the deep. Because who knows? Maybe the next tide will whisper your name.